Please welcome Amos Gitai. Amos, thank you for this wonderful film and for coming to New York, special to discuss it with us. Before we take questions from the audience, I'll start out with one or two. Can you talk a bit about the process of going back to the footage that you shot 20 years ago and how you selected what material to use, how you edited the material?
I think it's anyway. I think it's always a problem to speak immediately after a film, because I think I told you once, the best film I've seen start when the screening is over, because you have to digest it and figure out and recompose it and so on. And as I said before, it's built really of two parts. There is this journey that I did with Rabin, and then there is this collage of associative collage at the end. So I think the journey was more or less chronological. We got access to be in most meetings in Washington and Cairo, and this quite extensive interview with him in Jerusalem, and also we traveled to Gaza and to like you've seen. So I think I wanted to keep a more simple, sober, kind of linear structure of this one.
And was it always your intent to interweave the footage with Rabin with the man on the street interviews that you did?
I don't know. A process of editing is more associative. It's not like, you write let's say in a case of fiction, you write a script, and then for me, it's a bit like a Talmudic exercise. You make a gesture, and then you reinterpret it, and then you film it, and you reinterpret it again in the editing. So you eliminate some elements, you restructure, you create an associative chain. So it's a continuous procedure of reinterpretation. That's why I don't like the idea of executing, in the bad sense, a film, which is more and more the costume now, because now the marketing people are very dominant, so they have to judge everything by the screenplay, and then basically you have to execute the screenplay. But I think that the screenplay is a necessary simulation, and after you write it, you are confronted with sometimes idea which don't come from you. It's a cooperative gesture. So some ideas come from the actors, from the drivers, from the cameraman. So it's you have to really be very tuned to receive it and to restructure it. So I think that it's not a linear procedure,
Do we have any questions? And I'll repeat them so everyone can hear. Yes. This viewer says the film is so powerful, seeing Rabin like this. Is the film being shown in Israel right now? Were you privy to the little conflict between Paris?
I did also long interviews with Peres, and also with, which I didn't include in this editing. I think that to go back to the previous question, the Rabin chose Peres, which was his rival, and gave him a real position. So in a way, he did a good gesture of a casting. Because when you did casting, I saw other prime ministers like Barak and so on, or Olmert, who gave the Ministry of Defense to Peretz, and so they tried to manipulate it and give weak people important position. Rabin felt comfortable enough with himself, and he recognized also the qualities of Peres in being a good diplomat, and I think this couple achieved many things in spite of their rivalries in the primaries. It's not, for me, it's not surprising that Rabin is really incarnating a kind of Israeli that I like, simple talking, not so much media spins like the guy we have right now, and really straight talk. And I think this is how he gained a lot of respect also in the region. Also when he disagreed with Arafat and the Arab leaders, you know, this was my impression when I spoke to him. There was not a gram of a phony. He felt that he can speak out what he thinks, and I think that's why he's really the last significant leader of the left. You know.
So this is going to be shown on Israeli television, or what?
Possibly. I will let you, Ron, negotiate with them.
Yes, in the red shirt. This viewer feels that, first of all, compliments on the impressive film. This viewer feels that when the Oslo Accords were signed in '93, Arafat made it clear that they were not to be taken seriously. What is your response to that?
What would not be taken seriously?
Did I recapitulate correctly? I think that's an opinion.
What would not be? Let's say between the two, I would trust more Rabin, you know. And because I think that the fact that Arafat didn't put order and allowed the Palestinian ultra-nationalists and fundamentalists to put bombs in buses in Tel Aviv helped the Israeli ultra-right. So this coalition always works very well in the Middle East, and the result of it that finally they killed Rabin. So, but I think that Rabin, if he was if he was alive, he was very determined to go through it. And when you see the situation in the last 20 years since, you cannot but regret the assassination of Rabin, whatever is the position of Arafat, you know. I think he was not a naive Rabin about it, but he thought that in order to stabilize the Israeli existence in the Middle East, he has to find inroads into the Palestinian issue, and I think he was right. I think the lack of that can actually undermine the entire project, the entire Israeli project, and also lead to a much more authoritarian government, changing the legal structure, forbidding, breaking the silence organization, human rights, to speak, and a kind of a sliding repression, which I think is very dangerous for the Israeli society. So I think that his absence is significant.
Yes. The film started with a helicopter of peace and ended with a helicopter view of desolation. Is that your view, your prediction for the future of peace?
I mean, I'm from the generation who went to the Yom Kippur War. And the Yom Kippur War, whatever is the theory, was also caused by hermetic Israeli position, by the fact that Begin pressured the Dayan and Golda Meir not to accept Rogers' program of partial withdrawal of Israel from the Suez Canal, and eventually it led to a war of many thousands killed, and a big risk to the entire country. And I think that we are sliding into a hermetic position. Obviously, nobody can predict what will happen, but the fact that it's becoming more religious, the country, so the analysis is not rational but messianic. This is all of these tendencies are risk to the project of Israel as an open, modern, contemporary society, especially in such a hostile region. It's exactly in this kind of hostile region that you have to stay cool and analytical and strive to reach agreements in spite of all the difficulties. So I'm not sure that your parallel is wrong.
Yes. So the question is there a danger that groups like Breaking the Silence give the impression that everything was fine in the region until the occupation?
I don't think so. I think that the flourishing of all these human rights organizations like Breaking the Silence, B'Tselem, Rabbis for Human Rights, and others are because of the absence of the central government to protect the Palestinians. So I think that since Rabin speaks about it, since Israel is the military governor of this territory, it is obliged also to defend Israelis, but also Palestinians. And since there is a lack of this defense, Israelis, most of them for completely authentic and good reasons, take this position. I think it's a very noble gesture, and they should keep doing it, because I think that a government which is more and more controlled by the settlers' lobby and running according to their agenda is not defending Palestinian legitimate rights. And so you have good people with good intentions going out and doing it. And I think it's a very respectable work that they do. You have a right to disagree. You know.
Yes. There's a question about form. There's a leitmotif of the film. There are traveling shots, most of them going left to right. Can you speak about that?
I think that most of them go right to left, but maybe because I read the Hebrew, you know.
Oh, specifically about the double image.
No, the double image. It's. I thought that there is overlap of situations, so it seems to me a good way of making transitions. And Aviva mentioned one shot that actually is going from left to right, which is part of my film Berlin, Jerusalem. That part of the choreography was done by Pina Bausch, and it's about the burning of the books, you know. So this actually goes. It's going on in Berlin, so it's going from left to right. But it's true that there is I like, you know, I'm just an architect, and I never studied the film, not even 1 hour. So I like to work on form, because I think that you have to in a way, cinema has to walk on both feet. You know, you have to innovate thematically from a narrative point of view, but also from a formal point of view. So I like in each film to do something which has to do with form. And for me, the cinema which is only dealing with content can be replaced by an article or essay. So I like to work in the form, in music, and so on. Also the Ecclesiast, which is sung by Hannah Shigula on an arrangement done by the two sons of Stockhausen. So all these are elements that I like to integrate.
Yes. So in the interview with Rabin, he alludes to having had different views previously, and specifically he talks about a shift in between 48 and 49. Did he speak to you about a specific event or something that changed his mind?
I think that, you know, Rabin, like a lot of people who confront war, is not hating Palestinian or Arabs. He's in conflict with them, but the conflict doesn't nourish hatred. And so I think he came, for me, Rabin is really an Israeli patriot. He's not some sort of hallucinating guy. And he came to the conclusion that in order to stabilize the existence of Israel in the region, he has to find the inroads to the Palestinians, because the previous agreements were trying to avoid, let's say, the Camp David agreements were dealing with Egypt and trying to ignore the Palestinian issue. But in a way, he came to the understanding that this is the core issue. And if this is resolved, maybe the other conflicts can be dealt differently, including Syria and so on. So I think that he came to an analytical, when I decided to do the film, which was shown here last year, I had several meetings with people who were close to him when he negotiated it. And they were telling me about the level of details that, he would say, okay, we advance here and then we confront an obstacle, then we go this way. And then, so he had a kind of a roadmap because he was really determined to move forward. And one has to say that with his assassination, this process was decapitated and not replaced. And I think that now, even if the gentlemen here disagree with me, we are into a government which would like to annex straight big chunks of the West Bank, especially area which is called Area C, which is 2/3 of the West Bank, and not give Palestinians any political rights, maybe municipal rights, but not political rights, and construct a Syria of Buntustan, like in South Africa. And I think that this is, especially in this region, I think this is a major risk that they're taking, but they're doing it, for me, in a kind of a messianic attitude. There is no, very inspired by religion, by all sorts of rabbis, with all sorts of references. But since some years ago, I was working on a performance on the text of Josephus Flavius about the destruction of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago by the Romans. It also happened in a similar context when the Zealots took over and confronted the powers, and then 2,000 years of Jewish suffering, of being discriminated, burned, and so on followed. So one has to be a bit more prudent this time.
Okay, we can take one more question all the way in the back.
Yeah, when I watched it tonight, I actually regretted that I didn't translate some of the... This is the place where Rabin was shot, And right after he was shot, people wrote a lot of graffitis, very meaningful. I think it's a pity that the city didn't preserve it like an open museum. But in a way, this piece is a because cinema is also about memory. It's not just a showbiz, it's also memory. And memory is an active agent. So the site is the place that Rabin was shot on the 4th of November, 20 years ago.
Amos, thank you so very much for coming.